thank you all for coming to this debate. Let me welcome you. This debate, we will be talking about Slovakia, Poland, Central Europe, and European Union overall. My name is Samuel Jakubik, and my guest will be Mr. Miroslav Wlachovský, who is the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovakia and former Ambassador of Slovakia to the UK and to Denmark. Mr.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Fryderyk Zoll, who is expert on Polish, private and European law, professor at the...
Hello, hello.
Ah, wow. That's nice.
It's a little too good.
No, that's perfect. That's
okay.
Okay, so Mr.
This one works as well.
So Mr. Fryderyk Zoll is expert on Polish private and European law, professor at the Jagiellonian University and at the European Legal Studies Institute of the University of Osnabrück, member of Codification Commission at the Ministry of Justice and rapporteur for the EU Law Institute for the EU Law on Independence of the Judiciary, and vice chair of local committee of the NGO called Defense of Democracy, mostly during...
I was in the time of Law and Justice.
Yes, so during the Law and Justice governments. So, gentlemen, my first question, as an introductory question, would be, what is your most memorable, or maybe your first memory for Mr. Wlachovský when it comes to Poland, and for you, Mr. Zoll, when it comes to Slovakia?
My first trip to Poland was with my mother, because my mother, my late mother, to say, she was a translator from Polish language to Slovak language. She translated Polish writers like Władysław Terlecki, Jerzy Krzysztoń, Zofia Posmisz, and others. And she took me to Poland in a very particular time, because it was during the martial law. I remember that we visited one of her authors, Maria Koncewicz, and it was on the Polish countryside. She and Maria, they wanted to have a talk, and so they put me to play with a group of Polish kids, and at that time I already had a Russian language in a Slovak school. So why don't try it? Because I didn't speak Polish, so I tried Russian, and I had a crash course on Polish-Russian relations. Because when they came back, like in 2 hours, I was speaking fluent Polish. At least I was said that the peer pressure was pretty strong. But that gave me a very strong idea about how different Poles view Russians than we do in Slovakia. And later on, of course, I learned a lot about it. From my mom, but also from the books and from the different kind of debates about the Polish history. And I must say that during the communism we didn't know that much about our own history, because certain parts of our history were basically out of the question. There were certain names which shouldn't be mentioned and things like that. Well, the communism. But we were completely ignorant about our neighbors, and I think we still feel certain depth in that area. But that's from another issue. Yeah, but my first trip to Poland was connected with this story, and I enjoyed it tremendously. We went to Gdańsk, Sopoty, Warsaw, other places, but it was a very particular time.
About Slovakia, it was, of course, we're we were going very often through going to Austria even in the time of communism, but it was not really well reflected. But when I had quite a nice memory because it was at the time of my the honeymoon. We spent with my wife in Slovakia, and it was exactly the day of the partition of Czechoslovakia. So it was, and yeah, it was at Liptovský Mikuláš. It was a very nice, beautiful place, but all restaurants were closed. Everything was closed, so it was not quite easy. But yeah, so it was a historical moment. But then I have to say, it was always a problem that the collaboration on, for example, among universities was always through Germany, through Austria, but quite exceptionally directly. And now we are trying to come up, and we are now I have quite strong relationships actually, because for many years I'm taking part. There is a conference every 2 years in Castle of Svolenice, which is the beautiful castle of the Slovak Academy of Sciences. And there is a conference, basically Czech and Slovak, and with participation of some other, including myself, and I'm a member of this organizing committee of this conference. So we are working close together with the University of Trnava, with some law association of Professor Lubel. And this is quite vivid cooperation. So I have, in my professional area, we have quite a lot to do together.
It's funny.
Hello, okay. It's funny that you mentioned partition of Czechoslovakia, because today is the day of creation of Czechoslovakia, the 28th of October. So, but maybe let's stay in Slovakia and Poland. And my next question is on the development of where those countries have moved forward from the time that you visited them from the first time. And it's well known that 20 years ago, Slovakia was kind of ahead, we can say, when compared to Poland in terms of infrastructure, economy, services, and so on. But now the coin has flipped and it's the other way around. And maybe what are your views and opinions on why this has happened? Why has Poland moved forward so quickly and so well, and why has Slovakia stagnated so much?
We should start, yeah.
Well, that's the basic question. What went wrong in Slovakia? And I remember the times of economic reforms in Slovakia, which ended up Slovakia with the title of Tatra Tiger, with big influx of investments, and we basically ended up to be biggest car producer per capita, not in Europe but in the world. But this era of reforms basically ended up in 2006 with the second government of then Prime Minister Mikuláš Dzurinda, and I think we missed a lot of opportunities, and we missed a lot of opportunities in a good weather to prepare ourselves for the times when the weather might be worse, and we are paying a price for it. And there are a lot of debates in Slovakia why, for example, the infrastructure of roads and railways stagnated in Slovakia and developed so fast in Poland, and why Poland was much more successful in absorbing the EU money, I mean structural funds and cohesion funds. And part of the answer is lies also with the experience how to run the country. Slovakia was a relatively new country, or we start from scratch in 1993, and there was not that much experience with the governing and with the administrative capacity. And what I was told by my friends and colleagues, that when it comes to absorbing EU money, the system in Poland is different. There is a much bigger involvement of regional governments. So it's not that centralized like in Slovakia, which probably brings those money closer to people. That's one thing. And on the other hand, I think it's also it's much more difficult for corruption processes. And part of the problem in Slovakia is that the money were misused, and we didn't invest when there was a time to invest wisely.
It's quite difficult questions for me because I'm not an economist. It's a little bit observation, of course, and also the matter what is different and what is different, what was different. I think the answer to this question, also for a person who is not really specialized in it, of course, doing law, I have to do also some of economics, but it is not exactly what would be expected to really to answer this question. But I can guess a few things. We had, by paradox, in the year of 1989, Poland was in absolutely terrible economic situation. In such terrible economic situation, what's much easier to start a real economic reform. So it was much easier to, as we have compared, for example, from 80s, of course, I was quite young, but the difference between Poland and Czechoslovakia was the difference between Poland and Czechoslovakia was extreme to a certain sense. So it was in this the deepest time of Polish crisis, where the shops were completely empty, and with all these lines of people waiting for shops in the time of the martial law. So it was a time that this economic kind of small economic stability, which was, of course, in comparing to the Western countries, it was not really affluent situation of Czechoslovakia at this moment, but it was, of course, quite kind of economic stability, where in Poland we didn't have it. So it was a situation where it was much easier to start the Balcerowicz reform, so this shock therapy of the whole economic system. I had also a feeling, even in this comparing this two countries, even it was a time when Slovakia was much better developed according to the economic data. In 90s, it was not so seen traveling through Slovakia and through Poland, because I think it was something here of this individual entrepreneurship, which was at every place somebody was selling something and so on. Of course, sometimes it looks terrible, but it was a sign, at least, of incredible activity, of economic activity of people. And I cannot say it. You have to confirm it or not. But very external view without deeper analysis, only going through the country was. But it is nothing so comparable in Slovakia to this Polish small activity, but it was very important. It has its limits because we do not trust each other, which is an incredibly important factor and natural limit for developing of economics. And then I think also using this situation, we have compared in 90s the infrastructure of Slovakia was much better developed than in Poland. It was always this highway. While traveling to Vienna, it was always highway at Bratislava, and it was nothing comparable in Poland in this moment. And then probably it may happen that while Poland entered to the EU, it was much easier to use this all EU money for improving the infrastructure in comparing to Slovakia, where the infrastructure was fine, but it was in a certain moment there were probably other goals and other objectives. We could use this money for something which was quite basic, but then it was very important for this very important transformation of the infrastructural picture of Poland. And really it is so that at this moment our infrastructure looks extremely well. It is the question how it will be, how sustainable it is. Because of course now the EU money are coming, but of course whether we will be able to maintain all this infrastructure is another question, and whether we have sufficient economic power to do so. And it will be an incredible task for future where this money will not come in.
Yeah. May I have a short reaction to this? Two things. When it comes to infrastructure, the biggest debt I feel in Slovakia is that we still do not have the two major cities connected with a highway, Bratislava and Košice. It's not only the matter of infrastructure; it's also a matter of strategic interest of the state, and that's why I mentioned that we were not fully ready to govern, or we did not have this strategic thinking how to push the country and where to push the country. Because I think the infrastructure is absolutely important, not only from the economic point of view, but from the security and strategic point of view. The other thing, which I tend to agree with you, there is a different entrepreneurial spirit in Poland and in Slovakia due to historical reasons and due to late industrialization during the communist period in Slovakia. I think it would be good to speak with a social anthropologist and economist about it. But I always felt that there is a different approach to private property in Poland. It was not destroyed by communists, which I'm not sure about Slovakia, and this entrepreneurial spirit on a basic level is quite important when it comes to overall understanding of economy. Just two small notions.
I forgot to mention that there can be also, at the end we will have questions from the audience, so I should mention that. And maybe a short question that will require a short answer. Do you think there's something that Slovakia does better than Poland now?
No.
If we're the only one who make them, we're the best.
Yes. This is a difficult question. I have different concerns when it comes to my country and when it comes to Poland. For different reasons, because of a historical development. What I'm afraid in Poland is the polarization within the country, and I think we have it in Slovakia, but not in such a deep level. I'm testing this idea. I do not say it as an absolute truth, but that's my feeling that that's probably the one positive thing I see in my country, that the reparation of trust in Slovakia, it will take a while, but it is possible. It might constitute a problem in Poland.
I'm not sure also whether I'm sufficiently competent about Slovakia to tell it. I can guess that, for example, the such level of the crisis of judiciary which we experience in Poland is not comparable to this what is happening in Slovakia. And this is what we have now here with the Constitutional Court, with our judicial system. even probably we can find also kind of equivalents in other countries of Central Europe, but this level of problems which we experience, which are caused of course, they have different reasons, it has not happened there. And this is one of the very important factors which could endanger in the future the development of the country here, and could be really an institutional problem for further success of the country, it's a very sorry story actually, because it's a paradox that having this good economic situations and having infrastructure, and having a certain legal culture which was quite well developed in Poland, we are now at this problem with the judicial system and with the constitutional court, with all other elements of institutions. And these institutions are absolutely crucial for being a part of the Western culture actually. And if we do not manage to repair them, it will be something which would be a very, very bad fate for our further development.
Well, my humble opinion is that Slovakia makes a lot better beer than Poland, but it's a very controversial point.
I would be very careful. This is a very impacts.
We have a lot of this handcraft beers here in Poland, which are quite good.
Well, maybe that's a topic for another debate. So. And you mentioned the institutions and the legal system and the judiciary. And my question is, with this amazing development of Poland, if the dangers to this development and to this progression are more external, like Russia and what's going on in Ukraine, Belarus, maybe unstable EU, or more internal? The problem with the judiciary, maybe law and justice coming back to power, possibly with Confederacja and so on. If you can both put your input on whatever you think you feel more comfortable with, but if you think that the dangers to this development are rather external or internal?
It's very, very difficult to predict because we have too many factors at this moment. So this is something which is, I think, of course, the external situation influences us in very different ways. Some of them are strengthening actually the country because, of course, of certain level, of certain effect being under flag. So that you have this threat of Russia and you have to do something about it, and probably for certain development of industrial policies and so on, it could even strengthen the country by certain internal mobilization. But of course, these external threats of different with different sources is an important factor. We don't know exactly what will be the outcome of the war, what will be the situation of migration, what will be the situation of Ukraine after the war, which is absolutely a crucial factor for future of Europe. So, a crucial factor for future of Europe. So this is important part of it. But I think there are also very important internal threats, and with internal threats, it's malfunctioning of democracy for different reasons, for many reasons. But this level of polarization within the society, it is something which the democracy cannot overcome anymore. So this is a level of the polarization where people not only do not trust each other, do not recognize the legitimacy of the system. And now we are in a situation where part of the population actually refuse or dismiss the legitimacy of choices which are done by another part of population. And of course, that is the question of majority, which is quite thin, and when we have a problem now with our constitutional court is not recognized by the government, and which has some European also sources, because also the European Court of Human Rights made several judgments telling that the due process is not granted at the Polish Constitutional Court. Then we have decisions of Court of Justice of the European Union about certain Polish chambers of the Supreme Court, which are not recognized and are absolutely crucial, for example, for making a decision about the validity of elections, of presidential elections, of parliamentary elections. And then we have the internal problem of judges, which are one group of judges do not recognize, the so-called old judges do not recognize the new judges, which has impact on due process in all stages of functioning of the country. And it is so difficult to imagine that a country can actually well function for a longer time without having a reliable judiciary and without having the system envisaged by the Constitution for check and balances, where the Constitutional Court was one of the crucial institutions envisaged by the Constitution. And we had very well working Constitutional Court, and then now we are an entire disaster for many reasons. And then we have, of course, this malfunctioning of this institution, such impact that the balance of power between the president of the country, between the chambers of parliament, is completely different. It's shifted into the direction which was actually not accepted by the Constitution. And this is something which endangers the rule of law and makes the democracy actually not working. So it is a situation where it will have an impact. And all elections, if you have elections, but every election is a fight on everything, it is something which is extremely dangerous for the political system. So this lack of stability will be probably one of the future of the crucial factors for threat for the country in the future, and it's very vulnerable because it's also very vulnerable for it is in the case of extreme activity of Russian propaganda, which we have here. Yeah. We're just trying to, of course, to activate all these differences and activate this and deepen this polarization within the country. And therefore, these external threats and internal threats it's a complex which react on each other, and in certain situation, and so therefore being with kind of such institutional crisis makes the country extremely vulnerable for propaganda efforts, and then for manipulation in the process of elections. So these are probably the most important threats for the country.
I totally agree. I would say that the internal and external threats are intertwined. That I mentioned it in another debate I had today, that we do not think we are in war with Russia. We do not declare it. We as a West, collective West, we do not declare that we are in war with Russia. Unfortunately, Russia is in war with us. And I would date it since 2014. It's a different war. It's a hybrid war. It uses different tools. It doesn't go after hardware. It goes after software, what we have in our heads. And they are, unfortunately, from my point of view, they are pretty successful in this asymmetric war. I'm afraid my country started to defend itself very late and very weakly, and we are still having a huge problem there. And you can see that they are, with a different degree, successful in other societies in the West, even the long-term democracies like UK, like US, like France, and probably the countries with the best resilience to these external threats are Nordic countries, where you have a very high level of trust within the society and high level of trust to institutions, well-established institutions, and this is something we should try to achieve, but this takes a time, a lot of effort, and it is difficult. So there are internal conditions in Slovakia which makes it vulnerable, but it is helped from outside, put it this way.
I would like to stay maybe within the topic of the judiciary system in Poland, and hypothetically, if the Law and Justice Party came back to power, this is a question for you, Mr. Zoll, if you think that they would become more aggressive with the abuse of rule of law, or if they would become more moderate and more EU appealing?
It looks like it will be much more aggressive in this way. So we will have probably what is announced already, and then this kind of revenge feeling, which is of course also a huge threat for democratic system. And when always the stage is that if one party will win, or then it will be a kind of judicial revenge on another party, and people. So it will be. So this is a kind of huge challenge for the system. But now what Law and Justice declares also for internal policies, for the place of Poland in the European Union, for our allies, relation with Germany, relation with France. It was the speech 2 days ago made by Jarosław Kaczynski, who told us that the real danger for Polish sovereignty and then for Polish independence is to Germany and then France. So it shows the direction of possible development, which is extremely dangerous also for the stability. And I would really love a system where I don't care so much about the outcome. I can accept both, but in this situation it's so that it's extremely the stage is extremely high, and which is what I said about the risk of so deep polarization within the society. That if you say if you always have to play on everything, it kills democracy. There are many, of course, other factors deepening this process: social media and TikTok and TikTok democracy and so on. This is other factors which are extremely dangerous. But probably, if we will have next edition of Law and Justice, it will be much more dangerous for the whole rule of law and the system of judiciary, and trying to reorganize it in a kind of authoritarian mode. But of course, we have to say also that you mentioned Confederacja, which is also a party which is it is Confederacja, and this says confederation. It is divided in very different directions. So this coalition, Confederacja and peace, it's not certain. So it will be much more complicated probably, and we will see that this development of the political scene, which will be much more complex. Also, we don't know exactly in which way this conversion of Prime Minister Tusk was telling something which was not really, probably was a little bit wrongly translated, but quite threatening, about withdrawing from the European Convention of Human Rights after discussion with Mrs. Meloni. I hope it was really a kind of fake news. I was looking for original sources. This probably he was not really well translated into Polish, because his idea was that, of course, the migration case law migration by Court of European Court of Human Rights do not respect the political reality, and we have to do something about it. And it was probably misunderstood in this way. But it's also not. Yeah, we have to be careful. There is a kind of tendency, which I also analyze as quite threatening the system, when the democratic parties are trying to endorse a little bit from the right-wing parties, but then they are never so good in this as the red-wing parties, and they lose everything.
Yeah, it's not smart to call it.
No. So this is it is much more important to really to endorse own story. And to rely on it and try to attract people for their own story, and not trying to follow up the story of other groups. And it's not only about this. Probably we have other problems with it. So we don't know exactly what will be in these 2 years. There are so many. We are in such uncertain situation, and probably Tusk has right on other side, talking about this pre-war conditions, which we are handling these pre-war conditions, and we will probably experience incredible provocations, challenging the Article 5 of NATO treaty in very complex way. And so 2 years, it's so long distance to go that there is a quite frivolous speculation. We probably will be in a completely different political scene in 2 years as we are today, and all these predictions are just free speculations on future.
Okay, I would like to move to the topic of European Union, but maybe from Slovakia and Poland take a step in between, which is the Visegrad 4, the V4 group. It has been pretty dead, and for a while. And my question is, if it was always, maybe this is a question for you, Mr. Wlachovský, if it was a project always destined to be dead, or if it's just something that came with time, and how maybe the dynamic is going to change with the new Czech government, which is more friendly towards Slovakia and Hungary, and if Visegrad will just become a burden to Poland rather than an advantage.
No, I don't think the Visegrad 4 was dead from the beginning. But sometimes we do not remember well why we have it. Because if you go back to, what was it, February 1981, I think, was that in the original V4 declaration, the first paragraph was about the coordination of our activities vis-à-vis our integration to the Western structures. It was a vehicle also for all 4 countries to harmonize with the West and to become as fast a part of the West as possible. That's one thing. For me, V4 was extremely important in the moment when Slovakia was somehow lagging behind in 1990. So when we had the government of Prime Minister Mečiar with his authoritarian approaches, and we were not invited in the Madrid summit of NATO to become a member at the same time like Poland, Czech Republic and Hungary. And I would say they were keeping the seat warm for us, and they extremely helped us to catch up in 1998, 2004. I have many stories from that period. I experienced it myself. So from this point of view, V4 is somehow one of my favorite projects. But it is a tool for those countries, tool for cooperation, and it's up to the political elite how to use that tool And V4 was quite successful in certain period of time when we coordinated our positions before the European councils, and we became a respected bloc with quite a lot of power within the European Union. We were recognized by our Western partners in that, but in a certain moment of development, this bloc became a roadblock, and when it come to migration crisis, it was viewed by some of our Western colleagues, but that we are basically blocking things, and that gave us a bit of a different image. I would still dispute those Western partners that in some areas we were right, but that's another dispute. But where the moment when Visegrad became politically dead on the highest echelons was the moment of Russian invasion, full-scale invasion to Ukraine. That was the moment when one country has a completely different approach to it than the three countries, Poland, Czech Republic, and Slovakia, because in that period of time after February 2022, Hungarian approach was different, and the threat perception was different. We also view Russian imperialism as a biggest threat, while in Hungary the Viktor Orban took a different approach, and that changed a bit with Robert Fico. I don't think that the change in Czech Republic, the change of government will be that clearly pro-Orban, pro-Fico. It will be more complex, and look, I don't want to overuse the name of Viktor Orban, but I remember the period of time when he loved to present himself in the role of a speaker of V4, that he and his ideas represent V4. It's not true. It's not true, and we should be very careful to this ambition. I read an article today that one of his advisors said that there will be, they expect that there will be almost an anti-Ukrainian coalition out of the Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. I mean, come on, dream on. I mean, I cannot guarantee for Robert Fico, but I think it's not in the interest of Slovakia to go that road. Why should we make enemies out of Ukrainians because Viktor wishes it? And the same applies to Czech Republic. Now, the V4 is still valuable project from my point of view. There is a good cooperation on a professional level, and it's useful. It's also useful when it comes to infrastructure. We have a lot of things to do together, these four countries. I mean, it's a shame that you can take a train from Budapest to Prague, and the time of that train is the same like in 1930s or even worse. I mean, we seriously have to do something about it. And I came to Krakow by train from Bratislava through Moravia. And it took me 6 hours. I mean, the distance between Bratislava and Krakow should have a different timing schedule.
Because you are Slovakia, and you are still. We have Austrian-Hungarian structure, and of course it was a different country of the empire, of Austrian-Hungarian empire. So for the railroads are going differently. But I think. This is again. So I'm not an expert on foreign policy in this way. I do quite a lot of comparative law and comparative stuff. But from Polish perspective, of course, Vyšehrad was never extremely important and extremely seen in awareness of public debate, or so it was something more for fans of collaboration. I think it is very important initiative because, as I mentioned, we need something in Central Europe which brings us closer to each other. But I think there is also a lot of quite different interests, and we are always in certain moment two or one country goes in completely different direction as another members of this group, and historically it's very difficult to identify this period where we had completely one mode of making action. So the interests in agriculture are different, the industrial interests, because of these different developments, are quite different. Poland, like larger country aspiring to being a larger country within the European Union, has a little bit different position in relation to smaller countries which protect their interests against larger countries. So there are a lot of complex differences in Vyšehrad. So therefore it is not so easy to make one block out of it. Poland probably is larger than all these three countries, or a little bit. So it is also makes it difficult somehow, because of course within the structure of the European Union it has kind of different impacts. So we have to find out how to really to cooperate better. We don't know too much about each other. I was sitting quite recently. We had a conference in Czech Republic, some summer school with Austrian students, Czech students, and I was also invited to this in Lednice. And I was sitting with these Czech students, and they told me they don't know nothing about Poland. So about history of Poland. So this is a country which is quite far emotionally and quite far with experience. Of course, now it's changing. The Baltic Sea became more attractive, and it plays a role. Of course, it plays a role that Poland is somehow more frequently visited by Czech and Slovaks, and I think it also causes quite a kind of change in this perception of each other. It is also strange that we are not able somehow. We don't learn. But we are speaking here in English, so it is also kind of strange. But we have to somehow overcome it. For example, we do something. For example, in Krakow, at the Jagiellonian University, in our law school, there is a program of Slovak law, and there are quite many students taking part in this program and learning Slovak and taking part in legal education. This is something extremely important. We have such programs with Austria, with Germany, with United States, with Spain, and so on, and with France, and with Ukraine, and we have with Slovakia, and this is extremely important part of somehow making this culture of being together, and I think it is a very positive development beside all these differences. And we have to use this for making such cultural, academic exchange much more intense and better for different reasons. But we have to also to work on it. There's also kind of of course not very good opinion. It was this wave of so-called Slovak habilitations in Poland, which was done in there is a problems with professors with not recognition because automatic, but it was a problem with academic exchange, but it was for many Poles it was considered as easier way to get habilitation and this academic degree. We have to do something about it to make it much more this exchange more intense, to improve standards, to improve this academic cooperation, because there is a lot of quite mistrust in it. And I think this is something which Vyšehrad can do also, and is not really doing this. So we have a lot of such fields which are not exploited sufficiently. And these countries which are potentially, and cultures which are potentially so close to each other, do not use this potential somehow. Yeah.
I forgot to mention one important thing. There are not many institutions associated with Visegrad cooperation, but there is one, and it's called International Visegrad Fund, which has a seat in Bratislava, but the director is on a rotation basis among the 4 countries, and they have reasonable fund and reasonable money support and very good projects, not only among the 4 countries but also with other countries, and I think the International Visegrad Fund had some very interesting projects when it comes to Western Balkans and their integration into the European Union. So International Visegrad Fund is one of the good products of Visegrad cooperation.
Mr. Toy mentioned that we were speaking English, despite being linguistically very close. So maybe when we will have the next debate about the beer, then we can speak our languages. I know from experience that beer helps as well with that. And Mr. Wlachovský, you mentioned that Visegrad was very important for enlargement, for our enlargement into the EU. And enlargement...
Our catching up.
Our catching up. And enlargement is a topic nowadays as well. EU is looking forward to accept countries like Moldova, Montenegro, Ukraine, and so on. And before we were accepted into the EU accepted the Nice Treaty, which restructured the decision-making process within the EU. So my question for both of you is, how should the EU restructure, if it should restructure itself now, when accepting more members?
I would answer politically, and that means that I don't see political will to go that way, that to open the treaties, because the last experiences were not that great in several EU countries, with referendums went the wrong way and things like that. It actually made the development in the EU even more complicated. So it is clear that if there will be a new big enlargement, yeah, and as a big, I consider enlargement with Ukraine and with Moldova, with the countries which were the former countries of Eastern Partnership, because I think the absorption capacity for Western Balkans, it is difficult, but it's doable. Ukraine, the absorption capacity, it would change the game, to put it this way, which I think it's worth it, but I'm not sure we are there politically yet, and that will be the issue. I think politicians in the European Union, they do know that we have to make European Union more efficient, and the mechanism of decision making has to change to make it more efficient. But they are not there yet politically, and I think that the will to open the treaties, I don't see it there.
This is extremely difficult question for many reasons. This enlargement, I think it must happen. For instance, in relation to Ukraine, I don't think so. It will be a stable peace without accession of Ukraine to the European Union. So this is something which is absolutely essential factor for making this part of Europe an area of stability. But our institutions are indeed at the end of its efficiency, and it concerns, for example, in this, if we maintain this way of integration, of very detailed legislation, for example, the structure of justice, the concept of the Court of Justice of the European Union as it is at this moment. It's not enough. It's not sufficiently. It is not able to deal with all these issues in this way, and it starts. As we can look at, for instance, from my perspective, as a professor of private law and dealing with implementation of directives and implementation of different or some absorption of different European legal acts, and then of the case law of the Court of Justice of the European Union. It is something which makes now the law unpredictable in quite dramatic way. And we have to do something about it, because at the level this integration was not so deep and was not touching really the basic elements of the legal scheme of the member states. This proactive judicial or judicial decision-making process of the Court of Justice was something which was necessary for integration, for closing the gaps. But now sometimes it goes extremely far in the way which is less and less acceptable, because it is one of the costs of this Polish crisis, because Court of Justice was trying to find out a solution, because it was the only efficient tool of the European Union somehow to find a solution for the crisis of rule of law in Poland. But we have to see that we have this problem that the independent judicial power requires equal powerful parliament, which is not happening, of course. But it's not happening because we do not have, because we want to keep the sovereignty of member states. We are not going into direction of federalization. And not going in direction of federalization means also less democracy. So it is. So this is incredible challenge within these institutions, and also, for instance, the deepening the integration in the legal scene without having a judicial structure, which is somehow. I was writing once kind of clear for courts which would be like federal courts in United States, of course not with this federal, but the justice system which can really respond. Now, as I was teaching once in the United States, and I was talking about Court of Justice of the European Union, and I was talking about cases, and different cases where the value of the case was about 60 euro. But it's important because, of course, the right to withdraw, and it's important to unify it. And of course, the Court of Justice is not a court in the traditional way, because it is interpreting the law as a law and not really solving cases. Mm-hmm. But when the students of the United States could not believe that there is such a court, such high, and dealing with the case of value of 60 euro. Mm-hmm. And this is a problem of efficiency. We have to find out solutions of it, and for the future we have to somehow reconsider the basic institutions of the European Union to make it much more efficient as it is at this moment. But yeah, it is the legal answer, and of course your political challenge. It's clear, it's obvious that we do not have now a space for reconsidering all this matter, which are necessary to make it sustainable, to maintain it for future. Yeah.
I have one more political, half legal question about EU, and that's the Article 7 mechanism, which is about imposing sanction on one of the member states of the European Union when a rule of law is breached. And this article was triggered twice, once for Hungary, once for Poland, but never quite happened, because in order for it to be in full force, there has to be EU unanimity. And Poland and Hungary always protected each other. So my question is, if maybe regarding or not regarding the enlargement, if this is something that should be rethought, and if so, how? and maybe in what stages, or if these proceedings with Poland and Hungary are still ongoing?
I think the Article 7 was closed to Poland for this procedure, so we do not have any more Article 7 procedures against Poland, to my understanding. I'm not completely sure about, but I think so. Yes. Pardon me? Oh, sorry. So we do not have this, but of course, the European Union has developed other quite efficient tools with structural funds, with all these funds policies. We have a lot of tools in the European Union to revise when we are getting the milestones of certain developments, and all these structural funds which are coming from the European Union are also dependent on the stage of rule of law, and it will be also quite interesting challenge what will be in Poland, that we are not able to reform our country because of this internal clash. So we are the European Union may act in future. Article 7 is of course not efficient, but it plays certain role as part of procedure, because here the procedure is important. That you are starting this procedure and there is something and a signal that something is not working well. But of course, the European Union has developed, use this case of Poland or of Hungary, our quite efficient devices. But it, as I said in my previous intervention, that it has costs, because this is this growing importance of the Court of Justice, not really balanced by other institutions of European Union. It is one of the costs of this. So of course we have to reconsider somehow for future maybe, but it's the same issue. Nobody will agree to it because also countries are afraid about Article 7 being abused, misused, and so on, probably there is no political will to willingness to really to change the system in order to make it more efficient. But I think the European Union, envisaged or identified the way how to achieve kind of results with the same effect, and probably that Polish judiciary was not broken entirely, was not smashed entirely during the time of power of the rule of justice. It is because of the European Union, and it was sufficiently powerful, not allowed to destroy the system as such. Of course, it will be quite interesting if it won't be a perspective of having funds. So if you change this position to receive more from the European Union when you pay, so of course it also diminishes the efficiency of certain instruments on the rule of law. But at this moment, the European Union did quite well job in balancing with certain institutions. But of course, we have to pay also for it quite high price.
I'm not a lawyer, and I cannot go very deep into the questions of judiciary and how it works in the European Union. It's not that I would call it uncharted territory, but I do not feel like an expert in this area. But the problem is the European Union has pretty good tools how to push pro-democratic reforms in the countries before they enter the European Union. It's a huge difference how you can deal with the issues of democracy and institutions, democratic institutions, and institutional stability before the country enters. But the moment when the country entered and became a part of the club, the tools in hands of the rest of the club are significantly smaller. And this, I think, in some ways was a new situation for the European Union. So that's why there is a discussion about how to deal with countries which are already members, and they do something which other countries consider not in line with European law or with the things which they agreed to when they signed the European treaties. Yeah, that's how I see it or interpret it. Another problem is that there is a lot of politics in the interpretation of the law, and that's what makes it even more challenging.
My real last question would be on the federalization, possible federalization of the European Union. Maybe just easily, if you yourself think that EU should become a federation in order to stay a relevant global power.
The short answer is we are not there yet, and I don't see the political will in the European Union member countries. On the other hand, we can see two completely different tendencies in Europe nowadays. One which goes in the direction that to be more efficient, we need more of a federation or more of the stronger institutions within the European Union. The other one is in a completely opposite direction, which says that we should go the way of European nations and with a very loose European Union. That's how, and we shall see really which one will prevail. But I think for the future of the Union, it would be much better to have a closer cooperation and to deepen the integration. But really, I don't see in these current conditions the will or strength to move it in that direction. And there would be plenty of questions. If federation, how it should look like, and I think it's still a pretty theoretical debate, and not the debate which is on the political agenda over there.
The problem is, of course, what do you understand under federalization? Yeah. So, because this is a label which could have a very different content. Are we talking about making out of European Union a state in the sense that it would decide about its own competences? Because this is exactly the definition of the state, and this is the difference, that the European Union does not decide about its own competences, because it's still the member states who carry this source of sovereignty. But of course, this difference is not sometimes very, very, very imprecise. And today, I mentioned this Code of Justice of European Union. To a certain extent, it's already an instrument of deciding about own competences. So something which converts it into quite a different structure. The issue is, we have also to sometimes to think, and of course it was another part of this speech about, or the debate about the content of the treaties for the future, whether we would like to revise them. Sometimes we are comparing European Union with such federation as United States. We can see that this central body of European Union sometimes has competences. I mentioned this example with the 60 euro case, which the federation or the federal government of the United States would not have. So this is, we are still, it's not so easy answer to say, we need more integration in certain areas. Sometimes we have to reconsider whether the competences are not going too far. So we have to think about some kind of rebalancing the European Union. And the level of federation does not explain anything, actually. So we have to, the federal, of course, we still, as we are claiming, this is always my discussion with some colleagues from right parties who are claiming, oh, we have to have a Europe of nations and we have to have more democracy in the European Union. It does not make sense completely, these two positions. The European Union has this deficit of democracy because it observes the sovereignty of member states. And this is the consequence of it. When we do not have this fully democratic elements, if we would have full democracy, then the sovereignty is limited or goes. So this is something which is in opposition to each other, and this is also a part of debate of general structure. But we have probably to think about some competence, because we have this difficulties under that this bureaucratic structure has a tendency to intervene into areas which probably are not necessarily put into the central administration, and will be better done by local governments. So this debate, I think, must be endorsed, and not only being limited to the levels as are we going in the direction of federation. Yeah, does not help us so much.
My last question would hopefully not be the hardest one, and after that we will have questions from audience. And it's if you would like to recommend a book, a movie, a song, maybe podcast, or any piece of culture that you would like to recommend.
Okay. When it comes to podcasts, I really like to listen to some of the British production. I like the podcast of Gideon Rahman, the FD chief of a foreign department in Financial Times. That's one thing, and the books. There are plenty of books. Sometimes it's good to go back in history, and there was a Czechoslovak Prime Minister Milan Hoxha, who wrote a book, Federation in Central Europe in Exile in 1942. It's a historic piece, but when you read it, you understand that he was addressing the very same things we are addressing today. How to fulfill the gap which somehow politically happened in Central Europe after the dissolution of Austro-Hungarian monarchy, and how to make a power balance within Europe, how to contain Russian imperialism. So sometimes it's good to go back in a history and read also the historic books about the integration process, even of our own proveniences.
I like very much a book which I read recently, which is called Podołaty Minłe, Globalna Historia Ukrainy, which is to overcome the past, the global history of Ukraine, wrote by Miroslav. There is also a Polish translation. I don't remember the Polish title of this book, but there is it's quite different from this Ukrainian original title. But this is absolutely fascinating book, because it's a book about he's also one of the, there are many issues which are handled very by one of the very important part is kind of comparison. Why the east of Europe did wrong now and the west of Europe did well. And this is exactly the part of the autonomy of institutions. So he is showing how this struggle between the church and the state and some kind of partition of it with its absolutely the crucial moment, which is Canossa. And when he shows how this element, how this factor in history moved Europe or pushed Europe into this direction when we had so many independent institutions like independent universities, like communities, independent cities and independent autonomous part of the society, because always it was possible to go to another ruler. It was church or it was the state. And in this Moscow model of full centralization of power, where you do not have a place to escape, killed all this innovation. And he is showing, for example, that after the invention of print, in Europe, they were printed books about 60 million, 70 million, and there were only a few thousands in Russia, and also in Moscow Principality, and this is and he shows this long process. Of course, it is about Ukraine and not only, but it's very important also to us to understand how important these autonomous institutions are and how institutions and procedures are important. Mm-hmm. This is the book about the relevance that our success of Western culture is the success of institutions and procedures, and not about great leaders of something. Yeah. Therefore I would recommend very strongly this book.
I forgot. There is a book which I would strongly recommend to read. It was written by, I read recently, it was written by Edward Luce, and the title is called Speak. It's about Zbigniew Brzezinski. It's really well-researched biography of Zbigniew Brzezinski, and it's most fascinating story about these grand strategies, but about Central Europe, transatlantic relations, and the future of Europe itself.
You mentioned British production, so I would add my humble recommendation for podcast, which is called The Rest is Politics.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good because it's two guys, one used to do it for the Conservative Party, one for the Labour Party, so it's very nice. And with that, I would move to the questions from the audience.
Obviously, my question will be about Ukraine, especially I can see a Ukrainian-Polish pin on Mr. Fryderyk's jacket, and I already had a lovely conversation with Mr. Miroslav today during dinner about Ukraine. But my question addressed to both of you gentlemen, because you are deeply involved in helping Ukraine, and I could say a little bit as well, because I had more than 90 trips to Ukraine with humanitarian help. And every time I go there, I see that the situation is getting worse and worse. I remember a time during Kherson offensive or Kharkiv offensive when we thought it would be like 2 or 3 months and everything will be over. And after 3 years, my question would be, what went wrong? What Poland and Slovakia could have done differently? Because this war has been lasting for more than 3 years and there is no end to it. So if Poland and Slovakia did something differently on any level, diplomatic level, political level, economical level, maybe some things would look a bit differently. So in your opinion, basically, what went wrong during these 3 years?
Of course, many things went wrong. So this ambiguity that we are between the war and peace makes us quite vulnerable, because we use kind of peace structure to deal with the war, and it has somehow not very good results and effects in the end. For Polish, I think Poland, because Poland helped a lot Ukraine, and at the decisive moment, at the first moment, we practically handed over all our weapons what we had. So it was incredible support, and probably it helped in a very decisive moment also when the Western countries were still deliberating whether tanks should be delivered or what are the other weapons which are too dangerous to be delivered. We did it. So I think from this perspective we have done a lot. And when of course something went wrong, it was of course to be expected, because we are, as I started my intervention here, we are extremely addressed by the Russian propaganda. And for example, all this situation, these blockades on the borders concerning grains. It was a very decisive moment that this feeling in Ukraine has changed towards Poland, and also feeling in Poland changed towards Ukraine. And I think, of course, here a lot of factors were in game. Also, I think external factors. Always the external factors are using the internal factors to strengthen them, to repower them, and move and push them into particular directions. It was something. I was waiting for 20 hours in line, and only because somebody helped me, because it was the line of 2 weeks or 3 weeks at the border in a very crucial moment. So I think it was something which was terribly wrong from the Polish from Polish perspective. And then probably also Poland did mistakes also, but they are more internal, where Poland excludes itself somehow from debate. For example, telling we would never send our troops into Ukraine. Probably it's true, and it would have a lot of disadvantages, because we had very complicated history with Ukraine, and probably the Polish troops in Ukraine will be a problem for many issues. But we should not say it so definitely, because it excludes us for debate about certain issues. So we should not close certain areas of debate, of negotiation for the future. But I think finally, of course, we were not able to be decisive in many areas in Ukraine. We are part, of course, of Western allies, and generally the Western allies, by reluctance, did a lot of things wrong. You mentioned this Kherson offensive, and it was the question. It was stopped at a certain moment. And of course, why it has been stopped, and probably we don't know. So many factors are completely
lack of ammunition.
Yeah, but it was lack of ammunition, but it was the reason why. And of course, I don't know what kind of information the rulers of this world had about it, and what Biden, what kind of of course, they have to make decisions in extremely complex world, and taking into account a lot of factors, and of course they have access to information which I would never have, and so it's so difficult to evaluate this kind of decisions made by them, and what kind of threats they had, and actually at this particular moment. So to stop the Kherson offensive was probably, from the strategic point of view, a great mistake, but of course for what reason it has happened, I don't know. What I cannot explain, and this is something, was to push Ukraine to make another offensive later on, where from all strategic point of views it was absolutely not possible, without having the rule of air, without having sufficient power, and Western allies were pushing into this offensive. And of course this offensive the cost of this offensive was extremely high. The Ukraine lost the best troops. All these people who were absolutely motivated died there. And it was a very crucial factor which weakened the army of Ukraine in extremely way. And at certain moments, somebody probably in future must explain it, what has happened and why the Western allies were pushing into this direction against all knowledge about strategy, about tactics, about all knowledge about making the offensive was not possible to win. So it was absolutely impossible to go through. And this is something which is not easy to be explained.
Yeah. Where did we do mistakes? I'm sure that there will be a lot of books about it, and it always comes to my mind how when West was able to stop Putin on his march. What should have been done to not encourage him in that direction? Where should we be more resolute vis-a-vis Russia and vis-a-vis Putin? Those are tough questions. I think we should go well on a timeline. Well, before 2014, there were some significant mistakes on the part of the West, and I would say the Nord Stream 2 was one of those mistakes. Really, I think it was the best idea, and we were telling it to our German friends that probably this is not a good idea, not only because the pipeline goes through Slovakia, but because it made Ukraine much more vulnerable. So there were many mistakes even before. I think you asked particularly about Slovakia and Poland. I think we've done quite a lot, both countries, especially at the beginning. When the quick reaction was quite important, and I'm still proud by the decisions of previous Slovak governments to send S-300 and to send MiGs when no one was saying sending it to Ukraine. I mean, it wasn't about the volume of the military contribution. It was much more about the timing and creating a precedent. And I think that was I still think that was a good choice on behalf of Slovak governments. But when to stop Putin and how, I think probably we had the wrong strategy even before 2014.
I'm from Slovakia, student here in UJ. My question, I will follow up with Ukraine. Last week there was an announcement between Ukraine and Sweden, or particularly about the acquisition of Gripen E's, the most modern fighters in Europe. There's a question whether there are sufficient funds when it comes to funding them, and one of the options is frozen Russian funds. My question is, what's the legal and political perspective about these steps? Thank you.
You know, I'm not an expert of this international public law aspects. Of course, there is an ownership issue and the issue of funds and consequences of taking funds which has been deposited. But of course, I think the war justifies it, and I think finally, in the situation of war, And there are, of course, different legal instruments how to do it, with kind of securitization ideas to create bonds which are based on these funds. And of course, it is quite clear that Russia must be forced to compensate Ukraine in some way. So these funds could be used for this, and there are different concepts. Of course, it requires solidarity, and Poland, Minister Sikorski declared already support for Belgium, for example, but not other countries are supporting Belgium so far, because of course this money is deposited partially in Belgium, and Belgium is afraid that it will face sanctions, and it requires absolute solidarity of members of the European Union. And this solidarity is because this solidarity is missing often, and it is one of the reasons that we are not able to act absolutely efficiently in this way. But I think the idea to somehow refinance with different possible tools is a very good idea. It must be enforced, and there is no really justification. We should not be against the power which is devastating every day cities and civil society in Ukraine, and there is no, I don't see why we should take care about kind of legal considerations about protection of property of Russian Federation. This is something which is in this way not so important for me, and I would support very much the idea of using these funds. And of course this is the matter of we have so many legal tools how to do it, not little less directly or more directly, and these tools are already on the table and they have been analyzed, and there is a political will, but it requires a kind of solidarity and support for the countries which will be more affected than others by taking these funds and using them.
I think there is also one another aspect in this whole debate, and that's not about Russian money, but it's about other countries' money in Europe. What will that decision make to those money? Yes? What will other countries take out of it that that this is also an option, that they will have a money in the European Union, they will do a war, and they can lose those money, you know? I think there is also this way of thinking within the European Union. I can dispute the morality of this way of thinking, but it is a big issue. How much will be Europe trusted with money from different parts of the world?
Thank you for coming. So this to kind of tie it, I guess, back to Poland and Slovakia and relations. I was thinking, being Polish and Slovakians, for me it's the same people. I don't see any difference. But how is it that if I see the same people, how can the outcomes be so different? I think back, you mentioned the Austro-Hungarian, let's call it system, and the outcomes were particularly similar in both countries. During the communist system, the outcomes were, financially speaking, of course, were similar in both countries. And now during the European system, the outcomes are moving in different directions, as we were talking about at the beginning. So what is the bet? I'll call it a bet, like Professor Zoll said, on the individual and the entrepreneurship in Poland, paying the dividends today, rather than not an investment in the infrastructure, as it was in Slovakia, that invested in the 90s in infrastructure, and that just happened not to be the bet that made Slovakia move in the direction that Poland went.
Using this opportunity, because we are talking, I forgot about one important factor, which is something which is a big advantage of Slovakia and also Czech. As we are looking, now it's a little bit different, but at least a few years ago, we looked on Polish streets where there were a lot of cars with Slovak and Czech car numbers. And the reason was, and there were Poles sitting there, and the reason was there were Polish business or entrepreneurs, traders, who registered their companies in Slovakia and Czech Republic. It was quite interesting why it was so, and why Polish traders were not registering their businesses here in Poland and in Slovakia and Czech. And one of the reasons were much more friendly environment for businesses. Even the taxes were not very different. But kind of approach of administration to businesses was and is probably, because this phenomenon is still there. There is a quite interesting difference, and one of important problems also for Polish businesses, for tax administration, and for even friendliness of tax administration. So somehow this VAT tax and so on, these differences were quite significant. It was quite interesting phenomenon which must be better researched. But talking to you, of course, it is not probably entirely true as you have described the past of these two countries. We have very different history. So even being in the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, we're different, because here it was one part of Poland, which was in the Austrian part, which had quite different policies. The Hungarian part was very different from Austrian part, also for national policies, for different policies. So this and situation of Slovakia was different for many because of many aspects. It was kind of emancipation of the nation and so on. So we have. It was also very different. It was different in between wars. It was different in Czechoslovakia time because of complex relation between Slovakia and Czech Republic and this Czech part. And Poland had this little bit different history by unification with different parts from Germany, like Polish 20s and 30s, the unification process from very different legal cultures, for example. And so this description, it is not completely accurate. We had a very different history, and this different history has also consequences today. And so, and therefore we are not so close as we should be close, actually, because of this cultural and linguistic similarities, and we have to overcome it. As I mentioned, we have to learn language. It is easy to ask, and we have to do it. It is quite a shame that, as I said, that we are not able generally to use the languages of so close neighbor and culturally so close neighbor, and we have to do it. For this reason, we have, for example, this program at the Jagiellon University, because we think it is important to change this.
I agree that there are significant differences among our countries when it comes to history and when it comes to political thinking. For example, one very basic difference is when you look at the Poland and Polish political thinking, it's very much horizontal in a way that you always dealt with the problems with Russia and Germany as a country in between, and you didn't look that much to the south. It's not only that, it's not the fact that the high Tatras are high. I don't think so. It is the question: what was the political issue? What was the issue of existence, of survival? And it was very different in Poland, and very different, for example, in Slovakia with its history of emancipation. A friend of mine, Professor Alexander Duleba, who is one of our really great experts on Ukraine, we were in discussion in Brešov a couple of days ago, and he tried to explain the difference, or let's say the quote-unquote pro-Russian sentiment in part of a Slovak society, why the idea of a Slavic brotherhood was somehow successful in Slovakia, because for the Slovak emancipation historically we had to deal with Hungarians, with Budapest and Vienna, and we were trying to find allies in the fight with two centers, and well, we find it sometimes in Berlin, sometimes in Russia. But that's what makes our history different, and some approaches are different. So it's not only about how we did during the communist times, and I would even argue that the way the communism was in Poland was a bit different than it was in Czechoslovakia. We had a different tradition in the interwar period. I would still consider Czechoslovakia a rather democratic country in at that period, which doesn't apply to the same degree to Poland or Hungary. So there are significant differences. And when it comes to infrastructure in Slovakia, that it was better before in Slovakia than in Poland, I agree to disagree a bit, because it is we still do have a big infrastructure gaps in Slovakia. I already mentioned one, the fact that we do not have a connection of a highway between two major cities, between Bratislava and Košice, but also the way the industrialization was done in Slovakia during the communist time. It was rather artificial. I mean, it was often happened in a way that the functioning or the big fish in the Communist Party decided, I have to bring something to my region, so let's do the factory there. It wasn't a result of economic thinking. It was a result of that kind of clan thinking or other factors, and it created an artificial problems we are dealing with today as well.
Okay, thank you for your questions. Thank you for your very interesting answers. I think we can close the debate. Thank you for coming at all to this debate. I think they deserve a round of applause. And I will just end it with make sure to follow Krakovská kaviareň on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for your question.